Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining Solar United Neighbors in the city of Norfolk as we present our Hampton Roads 2023 Solar and EV Charger Co-op information session. My name is Benjamin Hoyne, joined by my colleague Sakrit Mishra. We are both with Solar United Neighbors. I am in Richmond and Sakrit is in our nation's capital. We're also joined this evening by Megan Hale, Director of Sustainability at the city of Norfolk. We'll be here for about an hour, just to let you know, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and also have a chat function available for any questions there. Did want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. So if you can't watch it now, hopefully you're watching it somewhere down the line, and we'll be sharing a link with everyone that RSVP'd. And also posting it ultimately on our YouTube channel at Solar United Neighbors. But with that, I did want to welcome Megan Hale, the Sustainability Manager at the City of Norfolk. Thank you for her collaboration here. And let me turn it over to you, Megan.
Yeah, thank you so much and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. I just wanted to kind of give a little brief overview of environmental sustainability within the City of Norfolk and kind of how this collaboration came to be. So thanks, Ben, for the welcome. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Manager and have been in this role since about January, so pretty new, but I kind of wanted to showcase some of the other initiatives that we're working on here. Next slide. So back in 2018, our mayor set out to bring a group of people together who would help to write a climate action plan. It was really a huge community collaboration, folks from all different backgrounds that helped come together and lay out this climate action plan, which was certainly needed for our city as we, navigate the impacts of climate change and flooding in our community here. So that plan is pretty bulky, and it laid out 63 strategies to help us sort of reduce our carbon emissions. So it's my role to kind of lead the city through these initiatives and look at not only our municipal operations and how we can affect change that way, but also supporting our residents and our businesses and our visitors to the city. So, a lot of what I do, I use that climate action plan as sort of my framework and my guide. And I wanted to kind of hit on some of the strategic areas that I work on. So next slide. Yeah, so this is kind of a nice graphic representation of the many facets of the climate action plan. In the upper left, we're working towards building energy efficiency within our own city operations. We're tracking our energy consumption on a monthly basis, and we're looking at our annual consumption. We look at different buildings and how we use energy. We are engaged in the Department of Energy's Better Buildings Challenge. So that was a commitment that we made to reduce our city's energy consumption, our buildings as a whole by 20% by the year 2032. So my team is looking closely at that energy and looking at ways that we can become more efficient by whether it's, replacing old equipment or installing renewable energy onto our rooftops, such as solar. So another area is transportation. There's a whole lot we can do in the transportation side of things, whether it be rolling out more electric vehicle infrastructure, better supporting our residents in ways to navigate tax incentives, and of course, offering some public transportation that is not as carbon heavy as, single occupancy vehicles. We're also looking at food access and agriculture and how our different communities have access to food, expanding on our Grow Norfolk Community Gardens program as best as we can. I kind of mentioned renewable energy already, but we're looking at expanding that on our facilities within the city. We do have a solar farm going on a closed landfill in the next couple of years here. We're very excited about that. And of course, offering kind of a streamlined permitting process for residents who want to install those rooftop solar. So our staff has committed to, like I said, a streamlined permitting process, which might seem like an oxymoron here in city government, but they're a really great team over there in permitting and planning. And they've committed to a 3-day turnaround time for those permit applications and a less than 48-hour inspection upon request. So that's kind of an impressive little feather in our cap, and that's kind of what led us to receive the Soul Smart Award in silver, and soon we will be receiving gold. So that award is given to municipalities that, like I said, really lead the charge and streamline as best we can when it comes to solar installation. And then consumption and waste, we've got a lot of folks within the city who are looking at ways to reduce our waste, whether it's at home or in our businesses, how we recycle, how we compost at home, ensuring that things are being put in the right bin at home, but also, within our parks and our open spaces. And then everything here kind of leads back to education, engagement. We try and look at each of these components through a lens of equity, and just, really trying to do right by our community members here. So next slide. And then this I just wanted to show is just a little bit more of a graphically pleasing snapshot of what we do. But these, those 63 strategies are a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So kind of paring them down into different categories like advancing climate justice, facilitating green living. Of course, that relates right back to residential solar opportunities like the one you'll learn about tonight. And then greening our city operations. So we want to walk the walk and talk the talk, as I like to say. We want to be a leader for our community here at the city level. And then, I'll just encourage anyone that wants to learn more about sustainability within the city of Norfolk to visit the Climate Action Hub website. It's www.norfolk.gov/Climate Action Hub. I'll place that link in the chat. And then if you're particularly interested in solar, we have a norfolk.gov/solar page, and that's kind of all things solar. So whether it's permitting or looking for opportunities such as Solar United Neighbors, there's just a whole lot there. And if you have questions or suggestions, you can always email sustainability@norfolk.gov. And I think that's it for me. Ben, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan, and congratulations on the Soul Smart silver and soon to be gold. That's really quite an accomplishment. So
thank you. Yeah, I did want to add that, this team is rather small, but part of what we do is work with partners across the city, other departments, nonprofit organizations. What we do is we're kind of a networker, right? We want to connect the pieces and move us forward as a unit. And it's going to take a lot of work on the city's part, but also we need the help from residents who are interested in combating climate change as best we can.
Great. Well, as you discussed, one of the ways to combat climate change is to put solar on your home or small business. Can also save a bunch of money doing that. And so with that, I will pivot back to Solar United Neighbors. First, just talk about what is Solar United Neighbors. We are a vendor-neutral national 501c3 nonprofit. We have programs on the ground, people like myself, in state, in federal district, in territory, in 13, I believe, programs now. So that's mostly states, but most recently Puerto Rico. And we bring people together to address barriers to information, red tape, technology, policy, and a lot more. And we are unaffiliated with any solar company or any solar technology. We are really vendor neutral and strive to maintain that neutrality throughout this entire process, and really here to serve you, to educate and empower you in order to go solar as best can be, the best situation for you and your household and your family. Solar United Neighbors got started back in 2007. That is our founder and executive director, Anya Schoolman, in the the sunglasses there. Her son Walter and friend Diego came home from school one day and said, "Mom, we want to go solar." They looked into it and found it was really challenging. It's like speaking a new language. At that time in Washington, D.C., there was only 2 solar installers. They got different information about permits, about how to attach solar to roofs, wildly different prices, and all sorts of stuff. So Anya decided, if we're going to go solar, we need to get some help. And so they banded together with their neighbors, and they had about 100 neighbors that met at Anya's house, off and on for 2 years. And they dug through permitting, and they dug through solar technology, and they dug through everything and anything related to residential solar. And ultimately, after 2 years, they were able to leverage a bulk discount, and 50 of those homes in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Washington, D.C. went solar. And that brought press attention. It got a lot of attention. And so folks from other parts of Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, and really across the country started to call Anya and say, "Hey, we want to do this too." And Solar United Neighbors quickly became a full-time job for Anya, just really organically. It wasn't set out to be that way. It just kind of happened. And so now, 15, 16 years later, from those roots in Washington, D.C., first spread to Maryland and Virginia, of course. We've been in Virginia since 2014, running programs. And now in 2023, we have members in all 50 states. We've run probably 400 co-ops at this point. I think that number is a little bit old. And we have staff across all 5 time zones, not all 5, but 5 time zones. That's the 4 contiguous time zones plus Atlantic time, which is in Puerto Rico. And so, again, the roots of Solar United Neighbors was about banding together with your neighbors to kind of weave through a complicated process, get help, do it together, and ultimately get a good price discount. And that's what we continue to do today with our solar co-ops. So as I mentioned, we're in 13 states, territories. We've helped well over 8,000 families go solar. We've installed, I think it's now 70 megawatts of rooftop solar, help facilitate 70 megawatts of installations across the country. That is a utility scale size solar farm that is on rooftops across the United States, thanks to the co-ops of Solar United Neighbors. In Virginia, over 1,200 families have been helped, and we're right about at 10 megawatts. And also, we know that rooftop solar lets communities invest locally, creates good local jobs, and brings control of the energy system within our reach. And we're working towards a new energy system that everyone can participate in, and one that's fair and equitable. Our theory of change is right here. Is kind of our organizational vision. Again, 501c3 nonprofit. First and foremost, we help people go solar. That's what we've been doing again for 15 years. That's what we're doing here tonight. We help you learn about new and existing technology. We do our co-ops in an installer and technology neutral way. We also join together, not just here on a solar co-op, but we also have some robust resources. We have a Facebook page where folks just today were asking questions about renewable energy credits and other things. We have an email listserv, really robust, kind of technical, wonky email listserv about all things residential solar in Virginia. And we do happy hours. We're in Hampton Roads, in both Virginia Beach and in Newport News this past spring. Also do them in Richmond and Northern Virginia and up in Shenandoah and along the mountains, along the I-81 corridor, Roanoke, Blacksburg, etc. And so really trying to create a community of solar lovers and solar champions here in the Commonwealth. And then ultimately we fight for energy rights. Primarily this is done at the state capitol, the General Assembly. We try to help pass laws and create programs that allow more people to have access to solar energy. And as we do that, the cycle continues and repeats itself, and more people go solar, join together, and fight for energy rights. What we'll talk about tonight is a couple, 3 things: how solar co-ops work. We'll then run through a lengthy section on the technology, the batteries, EV chargers, and then ultimately talk about the economics of solar. Did just want to take a second to remind folks that feel free to use the chat function for any questions. I'll take a quick second to see, Sakrit, if there's anything in there I need to be aware of at the moment.
So far, so good. No questions for now.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Right, so what is a solar co-op? It is really a voluntary buying group that leverages discounts. Our job is to give you the tools to make an informed decision. It's really the best value on an installation. We're here to support you throughout the process and connect with fellow solar enthusiasts. And it's really important to know that the group has a beginning and an end, and is limited time to get the co-op pricing. The co-op is slated to end, I think, the end of November, so just after Thanksgiving, November 30th. So you certainly still have a couple months, but we're not able to get solar installers to offer discount prices in perpetuity. It's also really important to know there is no obligation. It's free to join the co-op. You're not obligated to go solar. What you really do is you just kind of put your name in the hopper and have the opportunity to kind of leverage and access those bulk prices. But ultimately, whether you decide to go solar or not, that is something that'll be between you and the solar installer. In terms of the process, we're in kind of the tail end of phase one. So this is months 1 and 2, kind of spreading the word, learning. In kind of month 3, we will be selecting the installer. We hope to do that potentially later in September or early in October. And the way this installer is selected is we put out a bid we solicit RFPs from solar installers in the region, and then we actually take volunteers and convene a group of yourselves of volunteers that want to spend an evening, 2-3 hours, really digging through a spreadsheet and really digging into all the nuts and bolts of the different bids, and then ultimately that group, the volunteer selection committee, will select an installer on behalf of the group. Everyone that joins the group has a survey that they take to talk about what's important to them, price and technology and local installers and maintenance and all sorts of other things. And so the selection committee would certainly take that into account. But ultimately, we are there just to help facilitate the process. But the installer is selected potentially by you and by your friends and neighbors. Once the installer is selected, they will then contact the folks that are currently in the group. We'll continue to get folks into the group again up until the sign-up deadline of November 30th. You generally would get a proposal from the solar installer pretty soon after the installer is selected, and you would ultimately have 30 days to decide whether or not you want to take advantage of the opportunity. It's important to note that the proposal that you get, it's not a one-size-fits-all proposal. They will review your roof with software, see its solar potential, shading, all sorts of other things, and give you a customized proposal that fits your needs based on your electricity usage, based on your roof, etc. And then it's just the price you receive will be that the panels and the inverters, etc., will be at that discounted rate. And then you would get your system installed. That's usually a few months after you would actually sign the contract. Probably be challenging to get an installation done this year in 2023, but that's not really that big of a deal in terms of tax credits, and we'll talk about that later on. And then ultimately, once everybody's installed, we'll have a party. As I mentioned, we had a happy hour, 2 different happy hours in Hampton Roads this last spring, and brought out folks that were in our previous co-op from last year and brought them out together to celebrate all things solar. And now I'll run through the solar technology here. First and foremost, we are talking about solar photovoltaic, or PV, which converts solar energy to electricity. There is solar thermal hot water. You might see that around a little bit in Hampton Roads. But that's not what we're dealing with here in the co-op. We are doing solar PV. You can see kind of an image here on your left, which is just a solar panel. And the important thing to note is really that the solar cells are really well protected. You can see there's glass frame and all sorts of stuff. Panels historically were about 3 feet by 5 feet. Now they're about 4 feet by 6 feet, usually in the 40-pound range. They can be a little bit higher than that. And the important thing to note is that solar panels are measured in wattage. This will be really important later. And so also solar panels generate electricity in DC or direct current. Another important thing to note, as I mentioned, panels are measured in wattage. So when you have a group of panels, that's called a solar array or a solar system. It doesn't really matter how many panels you have. Really, it's important for you to know what the wattage is, kind of what the power is of your solar array, really the power potential. And so when you have several panels together, you will get a measurement in kilowatts or kW. In this chart right here, you can see I have 12 panels at 300 watt panels. Real quick, that would be 3.6 kW or 3,600 watts. You could also have 9 panels that were 400 watts, and that would also be 3.6 kW or 3,600 watts. So again, 9 panels, 12 panels, that doesn't really matter. Certainly it impacts how many are on your roof, but in terms of like your power production, kind of your horsepower, so to speak, the amount of wattage, which is kW here, is the important thing to note. Common size in Virginia, the most common size is about 8 to 9 kilowatts, 8 to 9 kW. I have a 5 kW system. Really just depends on what your needs are, what you can afford. I don't offset all of my electricity usage, and that's totally fine. And generally, you want to stay below 15 kW. If you legally, you can get up to 25 kW, but if you're between 15 kW and 25 kW, you potentially be subject to a demand charge, which is an additional fee paid on a monthly basis that really you just want to avoid. Another important part of terminology is kWh. That's kilowatt hours. That's a measurement of electricity used over a period of time. When you get your electricity bill from Dominion or whoever your electric utility provider is, you'll see your bill, your usage is in kWh, again, kilowatt hours. And that's also going to be important to note when you are contacted by the solar installer. They're going to want to see your bill, and so they can see the amount of electricity you've used on a monthly basis. That will help them custom design the system and know how much power to give you. In addition to the panels, the inverters are important components. String inverters really just used on a ground-mounted system, and so the string inverters with the DC optimizer or the micro inverters are what you are likely to put on your roof. The inverters are really kind of the brains of your system. They sit behind the panels. They talk to the grid. The electric grid, we'll talk about that later. They talk to your electrical panel. They're really kind of a mini computer on your solar panel. It's also really important to know that you'll be able to get an app on your phone where you can monitor the production of your solar panels. It become your new favorite toy. You can kind of see, what the production was like. You might be able to see a little dip and see that there was a cloud that went by. Also really important, with the micro inverters, you can also just look at each individual panel on your app. And if something was to go wrong with an individual panel, you'd be able to tell that right in the app. Oh, panel 14 is all of a sudden not working. And so when you call a technician out, it just makes troubleshooting that much faster. Once you have the panel and the inverter, you're also going to have to figure out a racking system. This is an asphalt shingle roof. It's the most common roof type in Virginia. It's very standard installation for a racking system. You can also put solar on a standing seam metal roof. It just really clips to those metal bars running across the roof. A rubber membrane roof also works well for solar. The one roof type that you want to avoid is slate. Slate is so fragile that putting solar up there is a big challenge. Most installers will not work on slate because it has such a tendency to break while they're crawling around up there. Another important thing to note on your solar installation is your electrical panel. So ultimately the solar array, the panels will be hooked up to your electrical panel through conduit. Probably would come either on the outside of your wall or inside, through your attic or something like that, depending on how you want to set things up. And it's really just a simple connection to your electrical panel. Also important to note that the solar installer, one of the first things they're going to do is ask you for a photo of your electrical panel that looks just like this. That's because they're going to see if you have any breaker availability. You will need kind of a 2-pole 240 breaker to run the solar that's going to run into your electrical panel. Most homes don't need system upgrades, but your installer will be able to tell that pretty quickly. If you did need a system upgrade, electrical panel upgrade, if your panel is full or too dated or something, they certainly can do that. That's part of the co-op. Additionally, you are eligible for tax credits through the Inflation Reduction Act. I believe it's a 30% tax credit based on any work to upgrade your panel, providing you're using it for electrification purposes. It's also important to know what's a good roof for solar. It's a bit more of an art than a science. The first thing to look at is what direction your roof faces. We're in the northern hemisphere, so generally you want to face towards the equator. So a south-facing roof is optimal, but west works really well. Additionally, you get that great afternoon sun like I'm getting on my face right now. You also get good sun from the east, good morning sun, especially east by southeast. The one direction you want to avoid is north. In addition to your roof orientation, you want to make sure you have little or no shading, especially during those peak generation hours like 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. You need enough space available to mount panels, and that doesn't include chimneys and dormers and gables, etc. You want enough open roof plane to support the panels. And you don't need a new roof by any means, but you do want to have a newer roof that doesn't have any major damage. We recommend a minimum of 10 years remaining on your roof life. One of the biggest costs of solar is labor. And so if you have an old roof that's going to need repair, replacement, etc., in just a few years, and you put solar up there, well, a few years later, you're going to have to pay somebody to go up there and pull the solar down, potentially store those panels, while you then have that roof work done, and then later they're going to have to come back and reinstall those panels. And that's just a lot of labor costs that you'd rather avoid if you can. If a roof doesn't really work well for you and you have the space, you can certainly do a ground-mounted system. There's some great benefits to a ground-mounted system. You can orient the panels more towards the sun, so you might be able to get that perfectly facing south-facing orientation on your panels, which that'll then increase the productivity of your panels, make them more efficient, make them generate more solar electricity. However, there's more labor and material costs as well. You can see there's a rack in this yard right here. So this had to be built, right? So there's materials, there's the metal rack itself, there's the cost of labor to build that rack that you don't really have when you have a roof, which kind of the rack in essence is already there with your roof. Additionally, you'll need a trench wire in your yard to your panel or to your electrical panel, and that costs a bit of money as well. Usually if it's more than 50 to 100 feet away from your electrical panel, it gets really cost prohibitive. Some of the frequently asked questions we get, you can see here, warranties. The industry standard for a solar panel is 25 years of production warranty. They're going to maintain a really solid efficiency for 25 years minimum. So you should view this as at least a 25-year investment. Solar panels have no moving parts. There's really not a lot that can fail or degrade. You will have an inverter warranty, industry standards, somewhere between 10 and 25, depends on the specific inverters. Additionally, the installer will have a warranty, usually of at least 3 years, maybe 10 years around workmanship. That could be around a conduit run or roof penetration or something like that. Homeowners insurance is important to note. The solar array will become part of your home. You should certainly call your insurance company and let them know that you're going to be doing this. We found that kind of the industry standard in the US is that most insurance companies will either not increase your premiums or ever so slightly. There might be a national company or two that hasn't gotten on board with that yet and has significant increases. If you find that you're in that boat, we just encourage you to shop around. In terms of maintenance, these are really maintenance-free systems. You don't need to clear the snow. You shouldn't be getting up on your roof. The rain will clean your panels. You get plenty of rain here. They are hail resistant. As I mentioned, you have an app where you can do online monitoring. So really, you don't need to do anything but sit on your couch and occasionally check out your app and make sure things are working well. As I mentioned, 25 years a minimum production life. HOAs, one of the great things we've done at the state General Assembly in terms of fighting for energy rights is made it so that homeowners associations can't kind of unduly prohibit solar. And so, excuse me, there are, a couple modifications that they can require, but in general, you should be able to get solar if you're in a homeowners association. And if you're in a historic district like Norfolk or Williamsburg or something like that, I just encourage you to talk to the solar installer. They've got a lot of experience working with the local jurisdiction, and they could be there to help you through any questions you might have. So, Craig, how are we doing on the chat?
Great. I covered one of the questions, and you should be good to go. Nothing
Excellent.
for now.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right, we'll keep rolling with some important terminology. As I mentioned, you can see number one, we have the solar array. The solar energy passes through an inverter, and then it goes to your electrical panel, and then it powers your home. Your home, in essence, has the right of first refusal or gets first dibs on all the solar energy produced by your solar array. If there is a surplus, if you're generating so much solar electricity, during the day that you are powering everything in your home that's needed, and there's extra, it will then flow out to what we call the grid or the poles and wires, right, to Dominion or whatnot, through your meter and flow out that way. And then maybe in the evening or on a rainy day, if you're not generating enough electricity, solar electricity, you will then pull electricity off of the poles and wires from Dominion. And again, that'll run through your meter. And as you can see, it goes one direction, goes the other direction through your meter. And at the end of the month, we calculate that up, or Dominion calculates that up and says, here's what the net delta is, the net difference is of your meter in terms, and that's called net metering, right? So electricity flowing from your home, from your solar panels onto the grid, you get a credit for that. And as you pull electricity off the grid, and again, evening, cloudy days, you are kind of, ideally, you're just dwindling down that credit. And at the end of the month, in a perfect scenario, you might have a net, net of zero, where you have perfectly evenly supplied the grid with the same amount of electricity that you pulled from it. Again, it's different for everybody. In my home, I've only got a 5 kW system. We used to supply about 75% of our own electricity, even occasionally 100% in the spring and the fall when we weren't using air conditioning. But then my wife got an EV, and now we're not supplying 100% really at any time. But it's still making a good dent in our electricity bill. And so again, this is the basics of net metering, but also important to know you don't have to go all or nothing in terms of, you don't have to offset 100% of your use. Certainly, if you have the roof space to do that, if you have the budget to do that, that's a great thing to do, but it's not necessary. And this is just a quick kind of chart on net metering. As I mentioned, it's a 1-to-1 credit. So every kind of kilowatt hour that you're putting onto the grid, you're giving to Dominion to send to your neighbors. You are getting credited at the same rate that you are charged when you pull electricity off the grid. There's certainly daily and seasonal surpluses. As I mentioned, spring and fall are usually the best times for solar generation because you're not using your HVAC and you're not using your heat, and you can still get some long solar days. Ultimately, it is on an annual cycle, so you can carry over a surplus from month to month for up to 2 years. And so if you're generating surplus in the springtime, and then you're not quite generating enough in the summer when it's hot and you're using that AC and cranking the AC, you can dwindle down that surplus, almost like the old rollover minutes, so to speak. But at the end of the year, there'll be an annual billing cycle where it's kind of trued up, and then you could ultimately roll it over for one more year. We have a whole guide about net metering. I'll ask Sakrit to put it in the chat. Important to know, this is a really critical tool for rooftop solar to have this fair credit, this fair one-to-one credit. And you can see the effect on your bill, right? It just really basic scenario. If you use 300 kilowatt hours in a month and you produce 250 kilowatt hours, doesn't matter if those are used in your home or onto the grid, ultimately you would pay the difference of 50 kilowatt hours to Dominion or your electric provider. Important to note, if you are offsetting everything, you still will have to pay about $7 or $8 a month. It's $6.58 plus tax for the privilege of having the grid connected and kind of using it like your battery. And as I mentioned, you can carry over surpluses month to month. Also important to note, the annual billing cycle is based on your in-year connection date. So it's not January 1st. Mine's in November, yours could be March. It's, again, really based on the day your system is turned on by Dominion, the day you're given what's called permission to operate, or PTO. Also going to run through batteries real quick. It is important to note that when the power goes out, you will not have access to your solar electricity. I know that's a bit counterintuitive, but really want to emphasize that. As we just talked about net metering, we talked about your home generating a surplus of electricity and sending it to the grid. As you can imagine, if the grid is down, if if the power is out, and your home is sending electricity to the grid, and there's somebody, a lines person, working on the grid to restore power for others, it's a major safety hazard. And so the inverters in your panels, as I mentioned, they're kind of the computers and the brains behind your system. They are constantly talking to the grid, and they will instantaneously almost shut down and stop producing electricity once they detect an outage in the grid. And then once the grid's back online, they will start flowing again. So if you want to have access to your solar electricity while the power is out, while the grid is down, you need to have a battery. And what you would do, in essence, is you would have a closed loop or an islanded circuit where your batteries and your solar panels are hooked together, and they're just kind of ignoring the grid. The grid is over there. And so your solar and the batteries are working in conjunction. Unlikely that you would be able to power your entire home with those batteries, unless you have a really efficient home. Again, it'd be better in the spring or fall, because if you need HVAC, that's going to suck a lot of electricity out of those batteries. But again, really important to know that when the grid goes down, your solar will not work. But there are power outages that are increasing, and certainly no secret in Hampton Roads that there's more and more storms and opportunities for the power to go out. So in general, getting a battery is not really a great financial investment. The batteries are ballpark $10,000 a piece, and you probably need several of them. And so it could hypothetically double the cost of your solar array, and you're really only able to capitalize on batteries right now when the power is out. So do you want to spend $20,000 to $40,000 to have power when the power is out? That's a different answer for everybody. You might, if you have a lot of outages. You might, if you have a critical load at your home, like a well pump or medical equipment or something you really can't live without. If you work in emergency preparedness, that might be something that you need to do. But again, they're pretty expensive. They're also complex. They're hard to get nowadays, just in the global supply chain, competing with electric vehicles and everything else for those battery components. If you want to learn more about batteries, we have a whole webinar for an hour where you can learn about batteries. We have a energy storage guide as well, and I have Sakrit put those in the chat. Right. And finally, I'll talk about EV chargers and electric vehicles. You can get access to an electric vehicle charger as part of this co-op. We like to think in the best case scenario, powering your car with solar electricity is really the best local fuel there is. Whether you're powering a car with electric generation, solar energy, or even from the grid, it's certainly a great financial investment. These numbers are really pretty rough, and they're just an estimate. But it's a great way to hedge against rising fuel costs. Dominion will say charging an electric vehicle costs $1 a day. Others will say an EV costs $1 a gallon. Any way you cut it, it's really a much better deal than gas. And so you can get an EV charger, a level 2 EV charger as part of this co-op. A level 2 EV charger is a home charger, but it's more of a fast charger. It's not a 120 volt kind of trickle charge, slow charge. And so another breaker that you're going to need in your electrical panel if you were to get an EV charger. A 240 volt outlet is kind of like what you have for your dryer. You typically warranty for several years. And if you're gonna get an EV charger, you do want to think about where it might go. Is it gonna be indoors? Is it gonna be outdoors? Is it gonna be wall mounted, a pedestal mount? You will need that, as I mentioned, that space in your electrical panel. The one of the most important things in terms of cost is how far away it is from the electrical panel, how easy that is to access. If you're in a garage and your electrical panel's in the garage, pretty straightforward. But if they got to poke through a couple holes in the wall, or if they got to run it out to a detached garage or shed or something out back, then it could be a bit more. But these are just something to think about as you move forward. And usually the EV chargers can be somewhere between 1,000, 2,000, or even more. They are also eligible for the 30% federal tax credit, up to $1,000. We'll talk more about tax credit here in just a minute. We're doing good, Sigrid?
Gary did ask me a question about solar and Generacs, basically generators. From what I know, the way the system can be configured, the solar system and generators can run parallel to one another. Again, it depends on from system to system and how the installer rep, sees the property. But do you have any other opinions or insight on this?
Yeah, I think that's right. Just like anything, as we mentioned, the solar is kind of disconnected, or it's through the electrical panel, and so the solar is going to shut down if the power goes out, and so that's kind of separate from a generator, powering a home. So that would just be something to discuss with the solar installer. They'd certainly be able to set you straight on that, but I would think there would be no challenge, as long as the electrical configuration is set up straight for a generator and a solar array to work in tandem. So with that, final section is on the economics of solar. You can see the costs have dropped tremendously, even 73% since 2010. As I mentioned, solar is a long-term investment, no moving parts, 25-year lifespan. It's also a great way to hedge against rising utility rates. Utility rates historically rise about 2 to 3% per year. Although last year with the war in Ukraine and the global natural gas spikes, I think they went up 8 or 9% here locally. And so, whereas the cost of the sunshine never increases. And so the average return on investment, I think those numbers actually a little larger than they should be. We say 9 to 13 years. I think it's more like 8 to 10 years now in terms of ROI. And again, if you're talking about a 25-year investment, that in essence means you're paying for it for 10 years, and then for the final 15, you're in essence getting free electricity. You can see where the solar co-ops help you get a discount here is at the soft cost. That's kind of in terms of marketing and promotion and other things that solar installers do. We are kind of doing that for the solar installer, and that's how we're able to help lower the costs. Some example pricing sheet you can see here. I don't want you to get lost in these numbers, but I just want you to be able to focus on kind of the basic big numbers and know how much the system costs and how you are recouping your money, how it pays you back. So we're going to look at the right-hand column, the 8 kW, 8 kilowatt column. That is, again, about the most common size in Virginia. So let's say that the solar co-op costs $2.75 a watt. That's about the average price we have these days. That would be a total cost of $22,000. Important to note that this is turnkey prices. It's not like buying a car when you go in there and there's all these other little things, this, that, and the other that you have to pay for. It's 22,000 turnkey that includes permitting, inspections, a whole host of things. You would potentially be eligible for a 30% federal tax credit. You must have the federal tax liability. So that's really important to note. It is not a tax refund. Additionally, you would get this when you file your taxes, the following year from installation. So if you're in the solar co-op and you get installed in February, March, April of 2024, you would not be able to take that federal tax credit until you're paying your taxes for the 2024 tax year, which would be, February, March of 2025. And so you will still get it. It's important to know, but it's not instantaneous. It's not a rebate. It's not a refund. But that does kind of bring the net cost down to just over $15,000. We're very conservative on our estimates when we talk about electricity savings. We have $1,100 in 1 year. Again, the price of electricity goes up year over year, so it's not just a linear growth there. In 10 years, so we're at $11,700. And in 25 years, we're up to over $30,000. And there's also this thing called the Solar Renewable Energy Credit that is available in Virginia. As a producer of renewable energy in Virginia, that has value. Whether Dominion is going to pay that to you for the credit because of laws passed, the Virginia Clean Economy Act that mandates a certain amount of renewable energy generated, or perhaps a data center up in Prince William County or Stafford, from Google or Amazon or Facebook or somebody like that wants to quote unquote power all of their things in Virginia, all their factories and data centers, et cetera, in Virginia with renewable energy. They will in essence pay you to take credit for your generation of renewable energy. And there's a market for that. It's kind of like going to Wall Street. You go to the broker market. There's 3 or 4 different brokers in Virginia, and you can get some real money. We have the kind of really conservative upfront estimate of $9,000. You could do that. You could sell your SREX for 5 years, 3 years, 1 year. You could sell it spot market. That's what I do, where every couple months I might sell an SREC, and the price fluctuates. I think the most recent was about $45, $47, and that is for 1 megawatt hour of production. So that's not based on the size of your system. That's based on how much solar energy your system produces. But in general, an 8 kW system might produce maybe 10 SRECs in a year, something like that. And so, that could be $400 or $500 in a year. In 10 years, it could be 5,000, right? Or with a better price, even 9,000. So I think my estimates are probably a little bit low in terms of 10 SRECs a year. So long story long is that the way the system pays you back is in a couple of ways. One, there's the price, and then there's the federal tax credit, assuming you're eligible, and you should make sure again that you have the federal tax liability for that. And then in terms of kind of the production savings, it's based on electricity savings and the renewable energy credits. Another important thing to note is that the federal tax credit continues to be 30%. It was about to decrease to 0 next year, but thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, it was continued for another 10 years at 30%. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there's no tax incentive to hurry up and get your system installed this year versus next year. In terms of financing, excuse me, there's a few different ways you can do it. You can obviously take a standard home equity line of credit. You could refinance your mortgage and include solar. You could get any kind of standard loan. Additionally, the solar installer will likely be offering financing through their company. And then finally, co-op members have access to 2 different credit unions. There's the Clean Energy Credit Union, which specializes in all sorts of clean energy technologies, electric vehicles, solar, etc. They're out of Colorado. And then there's the Community First Credit Union out of Washington State, which specializes in residential solar loans. We do have a financing guide, and I'll have Sukrit drop that in the chat. And we certainly encourage folks to shop around for financing options and not just take the first thing that you see. And then what you should do next is you should join the solar co-op. You can go to solarugnitedneighbors.org/HR2023. We want you to be a smart consumer. Even if you get solar without going through the co-op, that's great. We'd be happy to help you. You could get a couple proposals, and we will review them for free. Also encourage you to join our Facebook page and our listserv in Virginia, and also ask Sukrit to drop those in the chat. If you're interested in serving on the selection committee, being a volunteer on the selection committee, stay tuned for updates about that. We'll be sending out an email, as I mentioned, probably later this month or early October. Encourage you to tell your friends and neighbors about the co-op. Again, it's no obligation, no commitment, but it's certainly a great opportunity if you're interested in going solar. And with that, I'll pause for any final questions, and I'll just say thank you on behalf of Solar United Neighbors. I appreciate you spending your evening with us. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to vateam@solarugnitedneighbors.org. Sukrit, do we have any other questions?
Ben, and no questions.
Excellent.
You're good. Yeah.
All right. Megan, any final comments from you?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that one of the goals laid out in the city's climate action plan address residential solar, and a goal was set to expand properties by 100 homes per year over the next 10 years to have that clean renewable energy coming from the sun. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'm hoping that you can kind of reiterate sort of the bulk purchasing, and I think for a lot of families, cost is the barrier when it comes to solar installation. So I'm hoping you can kind of emphasize some of those cost savings. And then I did have a question about the SRECs. Is that something that may go away? I know you mentioned that's a Virginia initiative. Is that something that may be disappearing in the future?
There's no plans for it to disappear. I mean, it was created by the General Assembly, so I guess in theory, any law could be changed at some point in time. But they also exist in other states. Pennsylvania has SRECs, Washington D.C. has SRECs, and others as well. And so even folks in Virginia, before there was a Virginia market, folks in Virginia were able to trade in the D.C. market. Not to say that's a guarantee, or also I think into the Pennsylvania market. And so there is some kind of cross state trading that can happen from time to time. But I guess the short answer is we don't expect it to go away. But nothing is guaranteed forever. But yeah, and then to your earlier point about the economics of solar, I really like to think of it as owning your electricity rather than renting it from your electrical provider. We all know the importance of owning a home and building equity and that sort of stuff. And eventually, if you pay off your loan, you then no longer have a mortgage. And this is the same kind of thing, obviously much smaller scale. But if you pay off your loan in 10 years and your system lasts 25 years, again, you're getting that free electricity. So it really is a tremendous financial investment, but it does require kind of upfront cost. It also requires a commitment to your home for the next 10 years, the next 25 years, right? It doesn't really work very well for you if you're going to move in 2 years or something like that. Or if you're a renter, it's not a tremendous opportunity. It really benefits the person that owns the roof, and the person that pays the electricity bill really need to be the same person in order to leverage the financial advantage here. But if that's you and your roof's a good fit, and you have the ability to finance a system, to purchase a system, in the long run, it'll pay off tremendously.
And I do have one more question about, and I know you're not a tax expert, but I thought perhaps Solar United Neighbors would have a resource for folks to better understand their tax liability, because that can be very confusing.
That's a great question, and I'll see if Sakrit would know more about the resources we have on our website. I think the general thing is that, again, it's federal tax, right? So it's not Virginia, and it's not, do you pay $6,000 at the end of the year or when you file your taxes? It's throughout the year, payroll taxes and other type of taxes that might be deducted from your paycheck throughout the year. Does that total the amount that you would need to, $6,000 as an example? So again, I am no tax expert. We encourage you to speak with a financial expert. But Sakrit, do we have financial specifics on our website, or just one pagers or anything?
So I just dropped it in the chat. And just to reiterate what you said, that is a guide, but anytime anyone asks any specific, tax insight or guidance, that's where we kind of refrain and just leave it to the tax experts. So this is in as much detail as we go in this guide, but when it comes to specific tax information, we're a bit more cautious there.
Right. Any final questions, Megan?
Not from me. This has been hugely helpful.
All right, I appreciate it. Well, thank you again to Megan and the city of Norfolk for being here and helping promote this. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. I think is it October 3rd?
October 3rd?
October 3rd, doing another one of these. And thank you to Sakrit Mishra as well. And thanks most importantly to all of you for joining us today. And we hope you join the co-op, and we hope you tell your friends and neighbors. And again, if you have any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to email us at vateam@solarunitedneighbors.org. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.